I think the relevant question then is really the motivation and capacity of the person who is coming to a therapist, a mindfulness teacher, or mindfulness-oriented therapist, or a non-dual teacher as well. And this is a critical point, actually, because like in your case, Rupert, I think most of the people who come to you are really very refined. Many of them are experienced explorers and seekers, and they've really honed their motivation to wanting to know who they really are and what the truth is, what is essential.
Yes.
Right?
That's very true. Because I'm not a professional therapist, people don't, unlike you, people don't approach me for therapy, they approach me for non-dual teaching.
Exactly.
And they've done their research. YouTube makes it very easy to do their research. They no longer need to tour the mountains, they just go to YouTube. So they are coming to me and they know that all they're going to get is this rather radical, direct approach. It's not, when I say radical and direct, I don't mean that I'm not willing to pay attention to thoughts, images, feelings. Of course I am, but they know that I'm going to go as directly as possible, and they are, as you say, ripe for that. They come to me for that.
That's right.
They don't expect me to entertain a story about what their parents did or didn't do, or the abusive relationship that they're in, although inevitably
it arises.
It arises. And I think that is something, one of the distinctions between what I'm doing and what you're doing, at least in your capacity as a therapist.
Important distinction.
Because you're also, I know, speaking as a non-dual teacher, but at least some of your people will come to you never having heard of non-duality, and it would be completely inappropriate for you to say to them, don't pay any attention to your abusive husband, just ask yourself, what is the essential nature of your mind? That is not going to help them.
They would be out the door.
They would be out the door, and quite rightly so.
Yes.
You would not be meeting them
where they are,
which is a very important aspect of what we both do. So, yes, when you say the intention and the maturity,
that's right,
of I think everyone's intention is ultimately the same.
Ultimately,
I want relief from suffering. But the level of maturity, the level of understanding makes a big difference as to where you begin the conversation.
And I think it's not just relief from suffering, it's actually wanting to know the truth as well, which to me, which are not, it's another way of saying the same thing.
It's, yes.
So many of the people who come to psychotherapy are not so interested in knowing the truth. They do want to be happy. They do want to be, have their suffering alleviated. But mainly they want to feel better.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. That's very true. I think there are really two pathways into the non-dual teaching. One is, I want relief from my suffering. In other words, I want to be happy. Or the second, as you say, I simply want to know what is absolutely true. I know in my case, it was the thought, what is absolutely reliable in my experience. If my happiness is invested in a relationship that can end in a phone call, then what can I reliably invest my identity, my security, my happiness? I wanted to know what is reliable. The direct path was, because it is the kind of esoteric core, or the essential core of the non-dual teaching, it was not always made available. Even in India, where the non-dual tradition originated, it was not available widely. Most approaches, even in the non-dual approach, took a more progressive approach. Perhaps not as progressive as what we would understand as therapy, but nevertheless, mantra meditation, a devotion to a teacher, a series of purifying practices, both purifying the body and the mind before the student was considered mature enough to hear the highest teaching about their own nature. But that has changed now. There were 2 or 3 people in India in the last century, Ramana Maharshi, Atmananda Krishna Menon and Nisargadatta, who spoke for the first time in India openly about this very direct approach. And they all had Western students. So for the first time now in the West, this direct approach is available. Previously, it was always hidden in, not so much in monasteries, but in ashrams. But it's now, for the first time, being made available on a wide scale. And that is, of course, not a coincidence. I feel that our age is ripe for this direct approach. It is no longer necessary to keep it hidden, to keep it, to consider it the last step of a series of purifying practices. It's true that many of the people that come to my retreats have been on a progressive path for 20, 30, 40 years, but I also notice more and more that young people without any background in psychology or spirituality are coming to meetings and are wanting this very direct approach and are capable of understanding it and going directly to the essential nature of themselves. So I feel that this age is really ripe for this direct approach.
I sense that too. There's just a growing readiness,
yes,
for whatever reasons, a greater openness to this approach, which is related to another question I wanted to explore with you, which is the readiness question as well. Because I found, I work as a non-dually oriented psychotherapist, I kind of straddle the border in terms of people, their motivation and their capacity. And I've noticed some people, and mostly I work with people who are very interested in this and clarifying their understanding and working with obstructions to it, and it's really satisfying and interesting work. However, I do work with some people, and it just feels like they have so much chaos internally, and because of attachment disorders or because of trauma, that their system really needs to be calmed and ordered in order to be actually available to do the inquiry and benefit from the direct pointing that you're describing. And I'm wondering what your view of that and experience of that has been.
I think that's a very interesting question. When I started speaking and writing about these matters 6 or so years ago, I was less open to the need for some kind of therapeutic work as a preparation for the direct path, mainly because I didn't have that in my approach. I was on the direct path, and so I was sharing really the only path I knew about. But I learned a very good lesson early on when I started teaching. A man that lived locally in the West Midlands in England came to me one day. He was a friend. I knew him not well, but I knew him quite well. And he had read Eckhart Tolle and was very excited about it. And I knew that he had some serious psychological difficulties. He was functioning reasonably well in everyday life, but I knew that he was fragile. He came to me one day talking about everything he was reading from Eckhart Tolle, and I had just started doing meetings in our home then, and he asked me, could I come to one of your meetings? Now, my initial response was no. But I overrode that response because I thought the direct path is for everyone. So I said, yes, of course, you can come. He came to the meeting. I did a guided meditation. We started having a conversation. He took the mic and he started asking questions. And as the more he questioned, the more wound up his mind became. And I realized that he was too imbalanced to receive what he was hearing. It was not taking him to his true nature. It was just destroying the security of his world but it was not yet replacing it with the true security of his own nature. And it left him high and dry. And I heard that a month later he was in a psychiatric unit.
Wow.
Now, I don't think it was directly as a result of the meeting, but the meeting must have contributed. And that was a very quick growing up experience for me. I realized, Rupert, don't be naive. Don't think that because this is the way that you came, it's the way for everybody. I do think it's the way for many people, more and more people, but there are some people who don't have the stability or the maturity to handle the implications of this non-dual teaching, and therefore there is a case for ushering in the teaching slowly, to coming down a little bit off the top of the mountain, to really meeting someone where they are, and maybe just taking 2 steps with them to enable them to stabilize there before you take the next 2 steps.